On today's show, we're diving into Florida, Missouri, Louisville, SMU, and Oklahoma previews for the 2026 college football season. Welcome in. This is Winning Cures Everything, college football podcast. I'm your host, Gary Seegers, at GaryWCE on all the different socials. Today, we are discussing the teams that I have power rated number 25 through number 21 for the 2026 college football season. Yes, it is only mid-May, but we're doing at least one show per week until late July or August. Then we ramp up with more content. So you want to make sure that you are subscribed, that of course you like the video, that you jump in the comments. You give me your thoughts on these teams. All right, let's not waste time. Let's get this thing rolling. Florida is the SEC's ultimate don't bury the body team, right? Way too much talent, way too many new pieces, way too much upside to treat this like a normal 4-8 rebuild, right? It's not a roster where you look at it and say, man, they just don't have enough dudes. That's not really the issue here. The Gators went 4-8 last season, but that thing got sideways fast, right? Injuries hit hard, especially at quarterback, defensive line as well, and in the secondary. You go back to week 2, that 18-16 close loss to USF, it felt like that was the one that knocked the whole season off track. The offense never really recovered. The team never really found rhythm, and even with the nice upset win at home over Texas, the season was basically spent trying to survive. Now here comes Jon Sumrall in year one, and of course things get very interesting with him. He has been kind of the SEC golden boy. Every school that had an opening wanted that guy. The expectation is Florida's going to play with more tempo offensively, get the ball out quicker, try to create some easy, explosive opportunities for a skill group that it has juice, right? It matters because you're replacing pieces up front on the offensive line. The best way to help that group is to not ask them to hold things forever, I guess. Tempo, rhythm, spacing, quick decisions, get the ball to playmakers. Defensively, this thing should be built around a pretty deep, disruptive front seven. I think that's the identity. Florida looks like a talented roster that had a bad season, not a bad roster that accidentally won 4 games, right? The ceiling is tied directly to quarterback development because they got a new dude in there, and they've got one that is a holdover, Tramel Jones. We'll talk about that here in a bit. But, of course, offensive line cohesion and whether this defense can stay healthy long enough to get that front seven to take over some ball games, right? The roster turnover, massive. Now, a lot of schools are like this, so this isn't new. But Florida added more than 60 new players, so it's going to look different, right? The most important part is that the defensive core stayed intact, and that's why the Gators are not exactly starting from zero. Bill Connelly, he's got Florida ranked number 1 nationally in defensive returning production. That is a huge deal for a first-year head coach. You're not walking into a total rebuild on that side of the ball. You got Miles Graham, you got Aaron Childs Jr. at linebacker, Jaden Woods and Cameron James, coming off the edge. And then Bryce Thornton is back at safety. Ben Hanks III is back at corner. You've got real SEC defensive talent, and it gives Florida a chance to be kind of nasty up front if everything stays together. You just got to make sure all the pieces gel, right? Offensively, that's where the questions start. DJ Lagway gone to Baylor. Now you got a quarterback competition, which I don't know that many people expected it to be a quarterback competition, at least people outside of Gainesville, because once Aaron Philo transferred in, he's part of Buster Faulkner. That's the new offensive coordinator, by the way. He's part of his group that came from Georgia Tech. But Tramel Jones Jr. has been awesome and looked great in the spring. Philo, the big advantage here is obvious. He knows the system. Faulkner is that new offensive coordinator. He built a scheme that helped them pull off multiple upsets, right? They ran a different style of offense, and that familiarity matters in this. If Philo can walk in and operate quickly, that changes the whole timeline for this offense. They've also got weapons. Dallas Wilson is back. Vernell Brown III is back. Jawan Ball is back at running back. You bring in Eric Singleton Jr., who was at Auburn, but before that was at Georgia Tech with Buster Faulkner, right? He's got a connection to the scheme. Bailey Stockstill from Georgia Tech. The skill talent is not the problem. Florida's got guys that can absolutely stress a defense. The bigger concern here is the offensive line. Austin Barber, Jake Slaughter, and Damian George Jr. are all gone. Florida did bring in T.J. Shanahan and Egan Boyer from Penn State, along with Harrison Moore from Georgia Tech at center. So there's some answers coming in. But everybody knows offensive line is not just about collecting bodies. It's communication. It's chemistry, leverage, calls, stunts, blitz, pickups, doing all of it together. That's the part that could take some time. So when we talk about teams gelling, that's the most important thing. Who can develop chemistry the best? Because all these teams are going to have transfer portal guys. That's just the way it goes. Defensively, the portal ads are pretty interesting on that side too. You got the kid from Jacksonville State, Emmanuel Agbadejo. I said that wrong. You guys correct me in the comments. Cam Dooley comes in from Kentucky, DJ Coleman from Baylor, Kanye Clark from UCLA. These are important because, the secondary is still kind of sorting out roles, especially with Devin Moore gone to the NFL draft. So when you look at the strengths of this team, number one is obvious, right? The skill position upside is legit. Florida does have explosive playmakers at wide receiver and running back. And, of course, as I mentioned, if quarterback play stabilizes, the offense can be pretty dangerous quickly. They got a lot of speed, a lot of juice, a lot of matchup stress. And with Faulkner's tempo and kind of quick game approach, the idea is pretty simple. Don't make life any harder than it has to be. Like, if you get the ball out, you reduce pressure on the offensive line, you let the playmakers go make plays. I do think the defensive front is going to be a strength for this team. It's the thing that gives Florida like a real floor if it hits. Miles Graham, Aaron Childs, Jaden Woods, Cameron James. That group can create pressure. They can rotate bodies. They can control games up front, so long as everything gels correctly. In the SEC, if you can disrupt without having to manufacture everything with pressure, you got a chance every week. Another strength, I guess, would be the defensive continuity. Number one in defensive returning production is not a throwaway note. These are all experienced guys. A new staff has something to work with immediately. They've got depth. They've got linebacker talent. And that, of course, I think it can buy them time while the offense figures itself out, especially with the way that the schedule starts off, as you can see with FAU and Campbell. So you got some time there before you got to take that trip to Auburn. Let's talk about the red flags, though, because there are some red flags here. The quarterback situation, definitely unsettled. Philo knows the system. He's still got to win the job. But Tramel Jones Jr. is in that battle, too, and he looked better in the spring game, and from what I understand, for most of the spring. He looks like the higher upside guy. But I don't know if maybe Philo is the guy that is not going to turn the ball over as much or not take as many risks or doesn't make mistakes on a play-to-play basis. Who knows? Once somebody owns the huddle and gives Florida some week-to-week stability, then they should be all right. But until then, you can't really assume that the offense is going to hit its ceiling, especially early. The offensive line turnover, I think that's probably the biggest swing factor on the entire team. You can have receivers running open. You can have tempo, you can have the right play calls, but if the line can't communicate and they can't handle pressure, everything gets stuck in the mud. And that's really how things become frustrating, right? Secondary still sorting itself out. I'd said they added Cam Dooley, DJ Coleman, Kanye Clark. They've got multiple guys back. But last year's injuries, fresh in mind, that group has got to settle fast. And for this season, that's really the derailment scenario, right? Quarterback inconsistency, offensive line issues, another wave of injuries, especially in the secondary. That's how you get a high upside team that ends up fighting uphill again, because the way this thing starts, especially in conference, it's not the most difficult slate, but at Auburn, Ole Miss at home, at Missouri, South Carolina, at Texas, all before your bye week in Week 8. That's pretty rough. The good news is, of course, the schedule is more manageable than what they've dealt with in recent seasons, but that does not mean that it's easy, right? It's still viewed as a top 15 schedule nationally, as you can see on the graphic here. Number 9 nationally in strength of schedule, number 5 conference strength of schedule. So it is what it is. It's the SEC. Nobody's going to hand you anything with this schedule. The early part does give you some runway to develop the offensive line, figure out the quarterback situation before you really start walking into haymakers. The swing games are kind of where the season gets decided. To me, that Week 3 game with Auburn is massive, right? That's the game that can change the mood of the entire season early. If Florida goes on the road and gets that one, you got belief. You're 3-0. You've got Ole Miss coming into the swamp. You've got some buy-in. You got some cushion. Week 5 at Missouri. That's another one. Road SEC games where the offensive line communication and the quarterback boys are going to get tested. That's not where you want to – you don't want to be guessing who you are at that point. So by week 5 against Missouri on the road, you should know what's going on there. You get to Oklahoma in week 10. That's my other one because I'm not going to consider at Texas or Georgia as key games because you're not expected to win those games. You should at least be competitive, right? But when you get to Oklahoma at home, you should know exactly what this Florida team is by that point. If the offense has grown up, if the line's settled, defense is healthy, that's the game where Florida can show that they've got a good ceiling. And then right after that, you go to Kentucky the week after that before you get Vanderbilt at home and then at Florida State. My 4th key game is that road game at Kentucky. It can define whether this is a good season or just another frustrating one, right? You cannot talk seriously about SEC relevance and then drop a game to Kentucky or Vanderbilt, right? I don't think you can do that. Florida doesn't need to be perfect, but you got to win the middle, right? If they split the tough stuff and avoid the bad loss, this can be a really respectable year one, and it can do massive things for Jon Sumrall's tenure in Gainesville. If they lose the early swing games, that pressure hits quick. I mean, say you lose at Auburn, well, you come back home, say you lose to Ole Miss. That would not be the worst thing in the world to lose to Ole Miss, but that would put you at 2-2. Then you got to go on the road to Missouri, play South Carolina at home, and then at Texas before you got a bye week before Georgia. Who knows? Who knows? The ceiling here, the ceiling is probably 10 wins and probably CFP discussion, right? If the quarterback play stabilizes pretty quick and that offensive line improves faster than expected, and this is the version where Buster Faulkner's system hits, Philo or Jones gives consistent play, the skill talent is explosive, and the defensive front seven becomes one of the better units in the SEC, right? That 10 wins, I think. The floor is, I mean, the floor could be pretty bad. It could, I think the floor is probably 6 wins, even with quarterback inconsistency, if the offensive line never gels, if you get injuries, all that. That version is not hard to see either because we've seen it, right? Talent does not always equal rhythm, especially with a new staff and this much roster movement. My most likely record here is 7-5. Win total is 7.5. The over sits at plus 112. Under is minus 138. My lean is the over because I like this team and I like Sumrall. I mean, he comes in and he can change the culture incredibly quickly. I'm not. This is not one of my better bets, right? This is not an easy run to the window thing. This is more about price and ceiling. If Florida gets to 8 wins, it's because of all the things that I talked about, right? The schedule gives them enough manageable spots to be able to build momentum. Margin is incredibly thin, though. 7 wins is very live. 6 is not crazy if the offense is clunky. 10 is on the board if quarterback hits and defense stays healthy and you get some help along the way, right? So that's why this Florida team is one of the more interesting high-variance teams in the SEC. Final thought here, I mean, this is a high-upside Florida team with explosive talent, a dangerous front seven, but the entire season hinges on whether the quarterback battle produces stability quickly enough. You want extra Winning Cures Everything content and a way to support the show directly? Head over to buymeacoffee.com/winningcures and become part of the community today. The Missouri Tigers come in at number 24, and they have built the kind of stability that most programs would kill for, especially in the SEC. But 2026 is where the Tigers have to prove they are more than just what the SEC's best bully of average teams, right? Eli Drinkwitz now in year 7. You got to give the man credit, right? Missouri's been stable. They've gone 29-10 over the last 3 seasons, and that's not accidental. That's not fake. That's not some cute little hot streak. It's a real program with real structure. The question is not, can Missouri beat bad teams? They've proven they can do that. The question is, can they beat good teams? Last year, they finished 8-5. They started 5-0. Everybody started getting excited, and then they go 3-5 down the stretch. Lost close games to Alabama, Vanderbilt, and then, of course, the bowl game to Virginia. And big red flag is this. They did not beat a single team with a winning record, and that's the line that Missouri has to cross. Now, obviously, losing the quarterback when they didn't help things. But Perbula did come back. It wasn't ideal. Obviously, he wasn't in for the bowl game. He was not in for the second half of the Vanderbilt game. You know, it is what it is. But this is not a bad team. It's not a rebuild. It's not a roster that you look at and go, whew, like that team's in trouble. But 2026 feels like the year where Missouri either proves it can beat upper-tier opponents or it stays in that good but not playoff good SEC tier. The identity for this team, I think, is pretty clear. I mean, this should be an offensive-minded roster with better quarterback play expected this year with the transfer from Ole Miss coming in. Strong running back, wide receiver talent, which running back we'll talk about here in a minute. And then enough pieces to be dangerous if the transition works. Defense was elite last season, but that side of the ball probably takes at least a small step back because, I mean, they were replacing a whole lot up front and in the secondary. So the Missouri season really is about one thing. Can the offense raise the ceiling enough to offset defensive turnover? And that starts with the roster. Biggest storyline is, of course, quarterback Austin Simmons comes in from Ole Miss. That is the ceiling play. That is Missouri saying we need somebody who can take this offense from solid, which is what they were under Perbula, to dangerous. And that's been the missing piece. Missouri's been good. Missouri has been consistent. They have been physical enough, organized enough, talented enough to win games, but you're trying to go from 8 wins to 10 wins in the SEC. You need a quarterback that can change games. And Simmons does give them that possibility, right? This is not just plug and play across the entire offense, right? You lose Kirby Moore, the offensive coordinator, who is now the head coach at Washington State, and that's a pretty big deal. Moore had that offense operating efficiently. Now Drink brings in Chip Lindsey as the new offensive coordinator. He was at Michigan. He was at North Carolina. He was the Auburn offensive coordinator. He was Troy's head coach. And I will tell you, like, I'm not totally enamored with that move. If you've been following, we've been doing this show for 10 years. I say we. It's me solo now. But if you watched the college football show that I was on with Parker and Kyle, and if you have watched Winning Cures Everything at any point over the past 10 years, you know that I'm not the biggest fan of Chip Lindsey. But that does not mean that this can't work because Eli is an offensive guy. It doesn't mean that Lindsey can't call a good offense for Drink. But when you lose a coordinator that had things humming, you better be really sure the replacement can maintain the same level of efficiency because that stuff is not automatic. Now, the skill talent is still there, right? You still got wide receivers back. Caden Lee comes in from Ole Miss. Caleb Goody comes in from Cincinnati. That gives Simmons plenty of weapons to work with. And obviously you've got Ahmad Hardy, who's a huge piece of this thing. Obviously him being shot a couple of weeks ago or a week ago, however long ago it was. Even with a chance of returning this season, that's a major loss. It's a major uncertainty. And that kind of changes the math of this offense, right? They got to rebuild the offensive line. Caden Green is back at left tackle, and yeah, that's huge. They bring in Josh Atkins from Arizona State at tackle. So the tackle play could actually be a strength, but that is 2 left tackles, so you're going to have to figure out which one moves to right tackle and et cetera. But, 3 starting offensive linemen graduated, 4 backup offensive linemen transferred. That's a lot of bodies that went out the door. So the tackle talent might be good, but the cohesion and the depth inside, that's still a real question. Moving over to the defense, like that's where the turnover gets kind of loud. Zion Young has gone to the NFL draft. Damon Wilson transferred to Miami. Missouri lost their top 4 defensive linemen, 3 of the top 4 linebackers, and 7 of their top 9 defensive backs. I mean, that's a lot of production and experience walking out of the building. But they did obviously bring in help, right? Robert Woodyard comes in from Auburn. Malik Bryant comes in from Miami. Chris Graves Jr. comes in on the back end. They transferred in a ton of secondary talent. It's not like they're just standing there with an empty cupboard. But replacing production is not the same thing as replacing continuity. Corey Batoon in year 2, he runs that 3-3-5, 4-2-5 mix. That helps, going into year 2, but it's a lot of new faces. There is defensive system continuity, so I guess that's good. But when you lose that much, there's probably regression coming. Maybe it's small, like maybe the portal additions cover it up. But expecting last year's defense to just show right back up feels iffy. So let's talk about strengths on this team. The first strength is the offensive tackle play. Obviously, we talked about that. You got Atkins coming in from Arizona State. You got Caden Green. That gives you something valuable. If those two hold up, it gives Simmons a chance to operate. It gives the offense a base to build around while the rest of the line develops. Second strength is Austin Simmons himself, his upside. That's the swing piece. Like if he hits, Missouri has finally got that explosive quarterback ceiling the fans have been looking for. That's how this team stops just being good and starts being dangerous, because if you combine Simmons with Donovan and Caden Lee and Caleb Goody and like a healthy version of Ahmad Hardy, like this offense has enough firepower to really threaten teams, especially when you look at that schedule. Defensively, I do think linebacker play can still be good because of the incoming transfers. Woodyard and Bryant matter. Nick Rodriguez is back, so even with the losses, there's at least a path for that group to be functional, maybe even pretty good. Red flags are pretty obvious here. Like defensive turnover is just enormous. Like that is massive. You can like the transfers, you can trust the staff, you can believe in the system, but it's still a lot of question marks, right? Number 2, the signature win problem is a big deal. Missouri has been winning a lot of games, but they've had kind of easier schedules, right? Conference strength schedule is number 18. That can't be right. I wonder if that graphic's wrong. When you got Oklahoma, Georgia, Texas, Ole Miss, Texas A&M all on the schedule, maybe it is based on where they're playing them. Anyway, the question is not going to go away until you can beat upper-tier teams consistently. Last year, like I said, didn't beat a single team with a winning record. They were close in some games, but that stuff doesn't change your resume. Like at some point, if you want to be taken seriously nationally, you got to stop almost doing it and just do it. Number 3, as far as a weakness, the offensive coordinator change. Like that's a huge deal to me. Kirby Moore leaving for Washington State. First off, good for Kirby Moore. That's awesome. Chip Lindsey stepping in, it means that Missouri's not just changing quarterbacks, they're changing the voice, they're changing the structure. That's a lot of stuff to manage in the same offseason. I said they're changing the structure. Maybe they're not. Maybe it's Eli's offense. I think it's Eli Drinkwitz's offense. This is the derailment scenario, right? The offense regresses without Kirby Moore. Simmons is more flash than consistency. He did have an issue with turnovers. The Ahmad Hardy situation kind of limits the run game. The defense takes a bigger step back than expected. If all that stuff happens, Missouri falls right back into that SEC middle class, which is good enough to scare some teams, not good enough to actually break through. When you look at the schedule, like Missouri's schedule was viewed as manageable last year. This year, a little more difficult, right? The good news is they have more opportunities for signature wins. The bad news is they have a lot less margin for error. Like, for me, some of the key games here, like week 2 at Kansas, I think that's a big one right away. It's early, it's on the road, it's a rivalry game, it can set the tone, because if you don't get that one, you are in trouble, because you got to go at Mississippi State, you got Florida and Texas A&M at home in back-to-back weeks, and then you got to go to Oxford before your bye week. Like, if Missouri is still sorting out the offense and the rebuilt defense is still trying to communicate, that's the kind of spot that gets uncomfortable fast at Kansas. Week 5 is another one, that home game against Florida. It's big because Florida's talented. That's kind of a name brand. That's a game that, if you're going to win big games, that feels like one of them. And it could tell us a lot about where Missouri really sits in the SEC hierarchy. And really Florida as well, but we're focusing on Missouri here. Like, if they want to be more than just respectable, that's the kind of game you got to win at home. Week 7 at Ole Miss, probably one of the biggest measuring stick games on the schedule, I would think. You're going to be an underdog. Austin Simmons going against his former program, that adds another layer to it. But more than that, it's the exact kind of game that Missouri has got to start winning if they're going to be taken seriously. And then week 12, I'm not expecting a win over Texas at home or a win at Georgia. But as far as key games for this season being a success, week 12 against Kentucky, that one at home, it's one of those late season games where, you've just been through a gauntlet of Texas and Georgia. Then you get Kentucky before you host Oklahoma. You better win that one. That game is where you've got the difference between 7-5 or 8-4 or 6-6 and 7-5, right? Or between 8-4 and 9-3. Missouri cannot afford to give away games if the goal is to be taken seriously. So the schedule impact is pretty simple, right? Missouri's finally got a chance to prove something, but it also means the record could get squeezed. If they beat Kansas, handle Florida at home, steal a game against A&M or Ole Miss, take care of Kentucky, now you're talking about a real season where you're on the verge of the playoff. If you keep losing the games that kind of define that perception, then we're having the same conversation again next offseason. Ceiling for this team, looking at the talent, looking at what they've got, probably 10-2. That's the version where Austin Simmons is just an absolute star that everybody talked about before he lost his job in Oxford. Chip Lindsey keeps the offense efficient, that kind of stuff. The tackle play is strong. Ahmad Hardy returns and gives them something. The defense reloads faster than expected. If all that stuff happens, Missouri could certainly be looking at a CFP berth. But the floor is way down there. Floor is probably 5-7 looking at the schedule. That's the version where the offense regresses. They can't replace Kirby Moore. Simmons doesn't become the breakout quarterback. He turns the ball over too much. The offensive line rebuild gets messy. Defense misses all that production, all that kind of stuff. And in the SEC, that can be a problem. For me, the most likely is 7-5. The win total is 6.5. The over is -128. And the under is +104. So my lean is to the over, which the odds certainly say that. And it's not because I think that Missouri is a lock to be some playoff contender. I think this program has just been too stable under Drinkwitz to project a complete collapse, even losing the offensive coordinator Kirby Moore and bringing in Chip Lindsey. They lost Blake Baker, and defense kept rolling. I think he just knows how to run a program. I think Drink is really good at that. The offense does have enough upside with Simmons and that skill talent to get over the number. I don't like the defensive turnover. I don't love Kirby Moore or losing Kirby Moore. But I need to see Missouri beat teams with a pulse before I start pushing them into CFP conversations, right? My final take on Missouri, it's an SEC program stuck between, respectability and legitimacy. And 2026 is going to determine which side this program actually belongs on.
Are you tired of sore knees or joints slowing you down? Go Sleeves uses built-in kinesiology tape technology to give you support, reduce pain, and help you recover faster. Use code WCE for 15% off over at GoSleeves.com.
Louisville comes in at number 23, and they are one of the ACC teams where I keep coming back to that same question. Is this an actual playoff caliber team? Or are we looking at just another really good Jeff Brohm team that sits outside the top tier? Because Louisville is close. They are absolutely close. Brohm is now in year 4. Last season, the Cardinals went 9-4 overall. They went 4-4 in the ACC, and on the surface, that's a really good year. 9 wins is a good year. You win 9 games. You beat Toledo in the bowl game, 27-22, which was way closer than it should have been. Nobody should be acting like the sky is falling here. But the reason it felt a little disappointing is because Louisville had chances to be way more than that. You lost 4 ACC games. One was the blowout against SMU. One was the 1-point loss to Clemson. And then you had overtime losses to Virginia and Cal. So you're looking at a team that was not that far from being in a totally different conversation, but injuries and inconsistency kind of kept them from taking that next step towards that ACC contention and playoff discussion. Because you had the upset win over Miami last year. Like that, I think that's the key with Louisville in 2026. You don't really have the massive games this year. So there's not going to be a spot for like a big upset, which is what Brohm is known for. Like now you just got to, I mean, they're favored. I've got them favored in 11 games. Like the identity for this team is still pretty clear. It's going to be an aggressive, explosive offense that's built around, skill, talent, quarterback play. That's what Jeff Brohm does. That's what Brian Brohm does, the offensive coordinator. They're going to create production at the skill spots. They're going to find matchups. They're going to make you defend space. Defensively, it's another transfer-heavy group. Brohm has been doing this ever since he got there. I mean, the entire roster just kind of flips every year. But they're going to emphasize athleticism, depth. They're trying to rebuild quickly after a lot of turnover. Louisville feels like one of the ACC's true, next-tier teams, I guess, behind Miami. I think it's them and SMU, who we'll talk about here in just a bit. 2026 is where Brohm either breaks through into real playoff contention or Louisville stays in that category of, man, like they're good, but are they good enough, right? Roster-wise, this thing is fascinating. Offensively, it starts with the running back, Isaac Brown, one of the most explosive players in college football. And when you got that dude in your backfield, your offense has kind of a built-in problem solver. You can be a little imperfect up front. You can be settling in at quarterback, but if Isaac Brown touches the ball and gets a crease, that play can change the game. They also bring back his backup, Keyshawn Brown, and Trayshawn Hurry is back there at wide receiver. So there's returning skill talent, and then Brohm went and added some more, right? Trey Richardson comes in from Vanderbilt. LaWayne McCoy comes in from Florida State at tight end. They added Brody Foley from Tulsa and Justin Reed from Tulane. The pass game pieces are not empty. They lost some proven production with Chris Bell going to the NFL draft. Colin Lacey, of course, graduated. The staff clearly attacked that issue through the portal. But the big swing here is the quarterback room, which Brohm has done basically every year. Miller Moss is gone. It's not that he was great last year at all, but he was maybe a steadying voice. Louisville is banking on former Ohio State backup Lincoln Kienholz to provide more than what they got last year. I think that's the whole season right there. If Kienholz is stable, if he gives them more explosive upside, the offense can be dangerous immediately. If he's still a projection and the timing is off, now you're asking the rest of the roster to carry a lot more. And maybe you can do that against this schedule. Kienholz or Kienholz, however you want to say it. He was neck and neck with Julian Sayin at Ohio State. Sayin, of course, went on to be a Heisman Trophy finalist. Is he really that good? Like, Ryan Day waited until week 1 of the season to announce a starter. We'll see. We'll see, because we didn't see a whole lot of him last year. There's another massive offensive question, which is, it seems like it's the same thing with all of these teams, but it's the offensive line. They lost all 5 starting offensive linemen. They lost 8 of their top 10. And that's not just like a little concern. That's not a, we need to replace a guard and a center. That is a complete and total rebuild up front. In the Big Ten and the SEC, I don't know how doable that is. Yes, I do. It's not doable. In the ACC, though, maybe it is. Like, I don't care how good your scheme is. Offensive line cohesion still matters. Communication matters. Blitz pickup matters. Run game timing and everything matters. You don't just roll out 5 new guys and assume it looks clean in week 1. Defensively, it's kind of the same deal. The portal talent's there. Turnover is pretty wild, though. Defensive line lost 12 of their 16 players at the position. That included 9 of the top 11. The secondary lost 10 of the top 11. You're talking about a complete rebuild across multiple levels of the defense. Clev Lubin is back on the defensive line. Antonio Watts is back at linebacker. They add several guys in the portal. Miles Norwood from South Carolina, Caleb Beasley from Tennessee, TJ Banks from Ole Miss, Tyler Thompson from North Carolina, Joshua Donald from Houston, Dalen Russell from Miami. You got dudes. Talent acquisition is aggressive, and I like that. Louisville is not just sitting still, but talent and cohesion are 2 different things, right? And I don't know if you can keep doing this year after year, just completely rebuilding entire position groups. I don't know if they can do that. There's also a coordinator change on defense. Ron English, Mark Hagan didn't have their contracts extended. now steps up Mark Ivy and Steve Ellis. Both have been on Brohm's staff all 3 seasons at Louisville. They both have really strong reputations as evaluators, developers, etc. That helps because it's not a total outside reset, but it is still a new structure with a lot of new bodies. All right, let's talk about strengths for this team. Number 1, of course, running back. I mean, obviously, now if you don't have anybody to block for you, that's an issue. But Isaac Brown is the centerpiece. He gives explosiveness and efficiency and an ability to create offense without needing everything to be perfect. You pair him with his backup, the other Brown. Cardinals have got a backfield that can take some pressure off the quarterback Lincoln Kienholz early. Number 2 is that offensive coaching continuity. The 2 Brohms, of course, they've got a track record of creating production at the skill positions. Excuse me. I think that matters even more when you're breaking in a new quarterback and replacing wide receiver production. You're gonna trust the Brohms to manufacture touches, right? Create explosive opportunities, put defensives in conflict. I think. Number 3. As far as strengths, it's a lot of defensive depth. Again, it's not guaranteed to be great. There are questions. But they added a ton of bodies in the secondary and in the front 7. It's a clear attempt to reload with athleticism. If Ivy and Ellis can hit on some of these evaluations, I think the defense may have enough depth to hold up. And that's why Louisville can win this year. Like, the schedule sets up nice, explosive running back. You got a proven offensive system. You got transfer talent everywhere. And this schedule gives them a legitimate path. But before we get to the schedule, let's talk about the red flags. Obviously, quarterback uncertainty. The new quarterback has a lot of upside, but still largely unproven. And in a season where Louisville wants to chase an ACC title, maybe get into playoff talk, largely unproven at quarterback is kind of a big deal. Second concern, replacing that wide receiver depth. They have leaned heavily on explosive wide receiver play, and now you're asking some new pieces to replicate that production immediately. Richardson and McCoy and Hurry. There's talent there. But chemistry with a new quarterback doesn't happen overnight. I trust Brohm. I'm sure they'll get that fixed. The third weakness, the third concern, is defensive consistency against elite offenses. When you lose that much defensive line production and that much secondary production, the question is not whether you can look good against average teams. It's whether you can get off the field against the best offenses on the schedule. And there's not a lot of great offenses on this schedule. We'll say that. There's the hidden stuff, right? Quarterback chemistry, special teams. Louisville hides a lot of the offense. Like, key skill players are being limited, or some of them are out. I mean, the kicking game might have a rough night here or there. They've had a couple of those over the years. Those are the kind of things that don't always show up as a big headline, but they decide some pretty high leverage games. The concern isn't really talent here. It's uncertainty with this team, which it has been ever since Brohm got there. Can the new quarterback settle in? Can the offensive line come together? Can the new receivers produce right away? Can the transfer-heavy defense communicate and hold up? Can special teams avoid costing you a game? That's what separates 10-2 from 7-5, right? Now, let's talk about the fun part, which is the schedule. Louisville avoids Clemson and Miami in conference play. That's huge. If you're trying to get to the ACC title game, avoiding those two gives you a real path. It doesn't guarantee anything, but it changes the math. The front half, though, is pretty tricky. As far as some of the key games, like week 1, they get Ole Miss in Nashville. That's a monster opener. Neutral site, SEC opponent. Brand name game. It's on a Sunday. We will immediately find out whether Louisville's rebuilt roster is ready for primetime. But then you move on to week 3, and you got a home game against SMU. And after last year's 38-6 blowout to SMU, I think they're going to be ready for that one. That's not a scheduling spot. That's a measuring stick game, because that's the other team that you're going to be competing against for a spot in that ACC championship game, it looks like. Everybody assumes that Miami's going to be there. Is it going to be SMU, or is it going to be Louisville on the other side? That's an interesting spot. That's a spot. So week 5 is another key game. So I've got 4 key games here. But the beginning of this schedule is where the tough ones are. At NC State, it's one of those road ACC games where you find out if your offensive line and your quarterback are really settled, right? You've got the neutral site opener against Ole Miss. If you lose that one, it is what it is. But then you get Villanova, SMU, and Wake Forest at home before you have to go on the road for the first time in Week 5. If they want to be in the ACC title conversation, you got to beat NC State on the road. Another one that I got is Week 10 at Georgia Tech. There's no cross-country trip this year. Stanford comes to you after a bye. You got to play at Syracuse after a home game against Florida State, but you should be pretty significant favorites in both of those. Stanford game, I've got favored by almost 3 touchdowns. But Week 10 at Georgia Tech is sneaky. I've got that about a field goal favorite for Louisville. It's on a Friday. It's a short week after Stanford. Exactly the kind of spot where a good team can get clipped if they're not locked in. I mean, the good news is that Louisville is favored to be, they're favored to win 11 of their games. The road conference games are NC State, Syracuse, Georgia Tech, and North Carolina. Those are all winnable. Like I mentioned, there's no cross-country trips this season. You're not going to go out and get beat by Cal or Stanford or have one of those games affect you coming back. And there's no Clemson, there's no Miami on the schedule. That's a playoff path schedule if you handle business. The early season results, though, probably decide the narrative. If you beat Ole Miss, you get through SMU and NC State clean. We're talking about a legitimate CFP contender. If you stumble early, it becomes another, solid 8 or 9 win ACC season where you're wondering what could have been. I think the ceiling for this team is probably 11-1, and that's the version where Lincoln Kienholz hits, Isaac Brown's a star, offensive line gels, and that transfer-heavy defense becomes athletic enough to survive the turnover. The floor, though, I think is 7-5, and that's the version where the quarterback play is bleh. The offensive line rebuild takes too long. The wide receiver room missed. Defense, too many communication issues, etc. The most likely record for me is 9-3, because you can always count on a loss somewhere with Brohm that you weren't expecting. However, the schedule does set up a lot better this go-round. The win total right now is at 7.5, and the over is juiced pretty heavily, minus 170. The under is plus 138. My lean, obviously, is over. Minus 170 is expensive. Nobody likes laying that kind of juice on a college football win total, but from a projection standpoint, I get it. Schedule sets up well. They're projected to be favored in 11 straight games after the opener. The offensive ceiling with Isaac Brown and Jeff Brohm's system, I think that's too strong to ignore. My final thought is this. This looks like a playoff caliber Louisville roster with explosive talent everywhere, but the season ultimately rides on whether Lincoln Kienholz can elevate that offense from good to championship level. That's the biggest thing. Did they hit on quarterback and the explosive skill position pieces? Did they hit on the line of scrimmage? Brohm has shifted out this roster over and over, and he seems to be pretty good at it. I'll trust him here. I'm going to go over. We'll see when I do my ACC championship preview, or I guess my ACC conference preview, who I'm going to take opposite Miami. But this Louisville team, this schedule sets up brilliantly for them. Hit that subscribe button and make sure to like the video. And if you're listening to the podcast, of course, make sure and visit Winning Cures Everything on YouTube at youtube.com/winningcureseverything so you don't miss any of our college football coverage this season. The SMU Mustangs are in at number 22. And look, SMU is no longer sneaking up on anybody. They're fast. They're loaded, confident. They're now carrying the weight of real ACC expectations. And this is not, cute little SMU made a run. That whole thing's over. Rhett Lashley, now in year 5, this program has moved from surprise contender to a roster-loaded ACC heavyweight. There's not a lot of those in this conference, but still. Last season, the Mustangs went 9-4 overall, 6-2 in the ACC. They were painfully close to something bigger. They lost by 3 to Baylor, lost by 1 to Wake Forest. They lost by 3 at Cal in a game that would have put them in the ACC championship. So when you look back at the season, it's easy to say, like, man, they were just 1 or 2 plays away. But that's also the challenge now. Like, when you're that close, the expectations change. Close losses are not cute anymore. Close losses become the difference between being in the playoff conversation and watching somebody else play for the league title. I mean, legitimately, if you handle that game at Cal at the end of the season, you're playing against Virginia for the ACC championship, and the winner probably goes to the playoff ahead of Miami. As far as the identity for this team, it's still very clear. Everybody knows this about Lashley. Fast-paced, aggressive offense, vertical passing concepts. You got athletic quarterback play because Kevin Jennings is still there. You got a defense that's built around speed, pressure, and opportunistic secondary play. That's what SMU football is under Rhett Lashley. The question is whether they can replace all of that veteran production that they lost without losing the culture and the swagger and the explosiveness that got them there in the first place. Because, I mean, there's a lot to like. There's also a lot to replace. The offense, of course, starts with quarterback Kevin Jennings. That matters a ton. 3rd season as a starter. In a season with this much roster movement, having your quarterback back kind of gives you a real foundation. Jennings represents stability and leadership and a known quantity at the most important position on the field, and that's a quarterback that has played in a college football playoff game. He's played in an ACC championship game. But it's not just him. I mean, they return a lot of their offensive line core, especially with P.J. Williams, Joshua Bates, Addison Nichols back. That gives the Mustangs a chance to be, retooled as opposed to rebuilt, right? And let's not act like they didn't lose real production. T.J. Harden's gone. I mean, he had a 40% carry share. Jordan Hudson's gone. Romello Brinson is gone. R.J. Maryland's gone. That's a lot of touches, a lot of targets, and really just known chemistry that walked out the door. But SMU did attack it through the portal. Yannick Smith comes in from East Carolina. Jalen Hill comes in from Alabama. Kendrick Raphael comes in from Cal, and I think he's got a chance to be really special. Randy Pittman comes in from Florida State. I mean, you got guys from Texas A&M coming in. The skill talent's not empty. In fact, it's pretty clear SMU may actually be faster and deeper. Maybe deeper than they were overall a year ago. But talent and production, that's not always the same thing. I've talked about that. That's key. Defensively, the turnover is even louder, right? You return linebackers Brandon Booker, Alexander Kilgore, Brandon Miazono. I think that's right. They also bring back the corners Marcellus Barnes Jr., Speedy Nettles. You know, those guys. There's still pieces in the back seven. But you lost multiple starting defensive linemen, several veteran depth pieces. That's a lot of leadership, experience, and physicality gone. The portal additions are important. Javon Thomas comes in from A&M. Jarvis Lee comes in from USF. Malcolm Alcorn Crowder comes in from Kansas State. You got more dudes from USF and UMass, etc. It tells you what SMU is trying to do. They're going to win with speed, depth, competition, like guys that can disrupt. The coordinator changes are worth mentioning too. Scott Simons he became the inside linebacker coach for the Dallas Cowboys, and Maurice Crum and Ricky Hunley. At least there's continuity there because they're going to be co-defensive coordinators, which is what they were before. It's just that Simons was the DC. But this is their 3rd season. They're going to get a crack at calling the defense. So you got continuity there. It's the same thing on offense. Casey Woods left to become the Missouri State head coach. But you still got Rob Likens and Garen Justice that are there as co-offensive coordinators. They've both been around for multiple seasons as well. So it's not a complete staff reset. You're just kind of changing pieces. But the program structure is still intact. As far as strengths for this team, number 1 overall, I think, is roster athleticism and depth. Like, they look faster. They look more competitive across the board. The portal has been used aggressively. And the roster doesn't look like one that's, trying to hang around in the ACC. It looks like a roster that expects to win the league. Number 2 strength is the quarterback, Kevin Jennings, right? Quarterback stability is everything. Like, when you're replacing veteran production at receiver, running back, tight end, defense, having Jennings back gives this team a pretty steadying force. You don't have to start from zero offensively, and I think that's a major advantage, especially when you got, a road game at Florida State and at Louisville in the first 3 weeks. I mean, that's massive. This guy's already been there. Number 3 is defensive front speed and some secondary competition. Like, they're trying to build a defense that can create disruption. The additions that they brought in can raise the athletic ceiling. Now, the question is whether that turns into consistent stops, but the ingredients are certainly there, right? And I think that's why SMU could win big this year. They got the quarterback, they got the system, they got enough portal talent to reload, and they've got a culture that expects to be in the mix. But there are red flags, obviously. First concern is you got to replace some elite veteran production at wide receiver, at tight end, at defensive line. You don't just replace that many experienced pieces and assume nothing changes. You kind of wish that you had more, like maybe if you started the season with UC Davis, that would be nicer, but you're starting on the road at Florida State. You're going to be favored, but that's a road game in conference to start things. Then you got UC Davis, then you got at Louisville right off the bat. But there's going to be new roles, new timing, new leadership, probably some early growing pains. The second concern is offensive tackle consistency and just overall pass protection. Even with 3 offensive linemen returning on the right side of the line, having experience, tackle play is still kind of a question. If you're wanting to run like a vertical passing offense, you got to be able to protect long enough to let the routes develop. The third concern is the secondary. Like, they got talent back there. They added pieces, but you still got to prove that spring improvement kind of translates into real games. There were some pretty big struggles in 2025. Like, that can't carry over if this team wants to win the ACC. And they gave up a lot of points to several teams. The chemistry piece is pretty big, too. Like, SMU lost some emotional leaders, some NFL-level contributors. Like, sometimes the new guys are more talented, but the old guys knew how to win in your building, in your system, right? Like, experience is what wins in tight moments. And that's the challenge that you got now. Can the new faces deliver in the biggest moments the way that the old guard did? Let's talk about the schedule, which I already brought up that they get tested immediately. It's a tougher ACC slate. They got 9 ACC conference games, so they lost one of the coin flips, whatever that is, and they got to deal with Notre Dame. But like, if you win the conference, it's not going to matter. It is what it is. Florida State in week 1 is a massive measuring stick game. It's not a warm-up. Like, this is not easing into the season. This is show me who you are right now kind of games. They will be favored. But if the new receivers and the rebuilt defensive front and secondary are not ready, you're going to find out pretty quick. In week 3, they go to Louisville. That's huge. Louisville is one of those teams that SMU is going to be battling with in that ACC contender tier, and getting that game early on the road is going to let you know which team is ready to contend nationally. Then I don't have another key game. I mean, you could say Virginia, but I've got them double-digit favorites in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 of their final 9 games. But week 10 at home against Virginia Tech, I've got that as a key game because VT comes to them on a Friday night. Friday games are always a little weird, and that's a spot where focus matters. If you're trying to make the playoff, you can't afford to have a sleepy night where special teams, turnovers, protection issues, whatever cost you. And you're playing that game coming off of a road trip to Syracuse, which is another key one that you kind of have to pay attention to. But that home game against Virginia Tech, I mean, you gotta be ready for that. Week 13, this is a weird key spot because I've got them favored by almost 17 points, but you play at Notre Dame, and then you have to go to Stanford in week 13. So Stanford is the other key game. Last year, SMU lost at Cal on that final weekend, and the loss kept them out of the ACC championship. So now you win the regular season out west again with a chance that the stakes could be pretty high again. And, you know, that's a storyline that's kind of waiting to happen. We don't know exactly what to expect out of Stanford. We're not expecting much. The schedule gives SMU a chance to make the playoffs, right? But it gives them very little margin for error. Like, early road tests are going to tell us quickly if it's – and this is the situation that Notre Dame was in last year, right? You've got early games that if you lose them while you're trying to get everything to gel, it could cost you. Because this team – I've got them favorites in 10 games. I think that if you lose – say you lose to Louisville and you lose to Notre Dame. What's your big win? And don't get me wrong, in 2024, I guess it was, they didn't have a big win. Like, they lost 2 games. They played in the ACC championship game. They didn't have a single big win. But they still made the playoff. So it is what it is. So maybe they don't need one. But those early games, Florida State and Louisville, are going to let you know if this is an ACC title contender or just another good team that replaces too much experience. The ceiling for this team, I think, is 11-1. I don't see them beating Notre Dame. But maybe you beat Notre Dame and you lose to Louisville. You know, something. I don't see them going undefeated. I think the ceiling is 11-1. And that's, that's the scenario where Kevin Jennings plays like a star and the receiver room rebuilds quickly. The secondary takes a step forward. Defensive front, creates disruption, all that kind of stuff. The floor, however, I think is 7-5. Like, I think that's the worst they could do here. The defense stays inconsistent. The offensive tackle issues show up against elite competition. Not that there's a lot of elite competition on this. New skill guys take too long to settle. Those close games flip the wrong way again. Most likely, I'm going to go 9-3. Like, the win total is 8.5. The over is -140. The under is +114. My lean is the over. And laying juice on an over is not the most fun thing in the world. Like, we just talked about this with Louisville. But, I trust the quarterback stability. I trust the offensive structure. I trust the culture that Lashley's built. And I think this roster may actually be more athletic overall than last year's bunch. But, the difference between 9-3 and something bigger is going to come down to new faces, right? The receiver room's got to hit. The secondary's got to hit. Defensive front, you got to replace real production. And you got to win one of those big early road tests at Florida State or Louisville to kind of prove this thing is real. I would expect them to come out and probably handle things on the road in week 1. But that is week 1 with a lot of new faces. Now, Florida State's going to have a lot of new faces too, but you're going to be on the road here. My final thought here, it's a deeper, faster SMU roster with real playoff upside. But the Mustangs have got to prove that these new faces can deliver in the biggest moments the way that the old guard sometimes did. If you can't watch the show live, no problem. Subscribe to the Winning Cures Everything audio podcast and never miss an episode. Of course, make sure that you leave a 5-star review, and don't forget, it's available everywhere you get podcasts. Shirts, hoodies, hats, and more. The latest WCE merch is now available. Support and rep your favorite college football show today. Just visit winningcureseverything.com/store. The Oklahoma Sooners coming in at number 21 this year, and Oklahoma finally looks like it belongs in an SEC street fight. Now the Sooners have to prove that the offense can throw punches instead of letting the defense do all the dirty work, right? Obviously that matters because those one-score wins from last season were all one play away from being losses. Brent Venables, now in year 5. Last season, Oklahoma went 10-3. They finished 6-2 in the SEC, and they made the CFP despite major offensive limitations after John Mateer got hurt. That's the part that should get your attention. They weren't some perfect football team. They weren't this clean, balanced, polished machine. They were very flawed offensively. They played one of the toughest schedules in the country, and they still found a way to get into the playoff. Now, the playoff loss to Alabama stings, right? I mean, Oklahoma jumped out to 17-0 lead and then lost 34-24. That's the kind of game that sits with you all offseason. You were right there. You had the lead, and then the better postseason version of Alabama showed up and took it from you. But the regular season gave you reasons to believe in Venables because, make no mistake, he was on the hot seat last year. But they beat Alabama on the road. They beat Tennessee on the road. They beat LSU at home. Now all of those, skin of your teeth close wins, those could flip. I'm not acting like Oklahoma just ran through the SEC kicking everybody's door down, but in this league, wins are wins. And Oklahoma proved it could win those physical, stressful, ugly SEC games. The identity of the team is pretty clear. It's elite, aggressive defense with some exotic pressure packages. And offensively, everything's built around John Mateer, some tempo concepts, and Ben Arbuckle trying to create enough explosive plays to kind of make this thing championship caliber. The defense is already there. It's can the offense get there? But the next step is simple. Like, you got to pair the elite defense with a consistent high-level offense. Like right now, it looks like a defensive-first Oklahoma team that finally's got the body type for the SEC. But if you want to go from playoff team to actual title threat, the offense has to carry its weight. And I think the good news is, for once under Venables, there's real continuity here. Same quarterback, same offensive coordinator, same defensive identity. Like, that's not a small thing. John Mateer's back. And that's the starting point for everything, right? When healthy, he gives Oklahoma the playmaking kind of tempo, quarterback-driven offense that Ben Arbuckle wants to run. I mean, at one point, week 4 last year, I guess it was, he was the leading Heisman polling guy. Like, he was the favorite in the Heisman odds. After last season, when the offense clearly got limited after his injury, keeping him healthy is probably the biggest single variable on this team. Now, we can talk about offensive line and whatnot. Biggest thing is how do you keep him from running, because that's such a big part of his game. Because if you run that guy against SEC defenses, we kind of know what we're going to get. We saw it last year. So, the offensive line, they return multiple starters. The run game has got to get better. They can't spend the entire season asking Mateer to be the whole offense. Like, and that's going to work against some teams. I mean, it's New Mexico, UTEP, maybe Kentucky, Mississippi State, some of those. It may win you some close games, but against the top of the SEC, like, eventually you got to run the ball with physicality. They upgraded the pass catching group. Trell Harris comes in from Virginia. Parker Livingston comes in from Texas. Then you got Hayden Hansen from Florida. Tight end Rocky Beers comes from Colorado State. Oklahoma clearly trying to put more around Mateer and give Arbuckle some more answers, which is big. I mean, Deion Burke's gone to the NFL. Like, you don't just lose that and pretend nothing changes. It's not that he was huge last year, but that's a big piece. But the Sooners attacked it with receiver and tight end additions. And if the new pieces hit, like, the offense should have more flexibility. Defensively, like, this team still looks nasty. David Stone is back. Jaden Jackson's back. Taylor Ween is back off the edge. Peyton Bowen is back at safety. Eli, I didn't put anything else down. I put Eli. Cortland Guillory is back. Kip Lewis is back. Owen Heineke is back. 7th year after he won his case against the NCAA. Like, it gives Venables a ton to work with, a lot of experience. Now, there are losses. R. Mason Thomas is gone to the draft. Grayson Halton is gone. Marvin Jones Jr., Robert Spears Jennings, he graduated. Derek Simmons gone at right tackle. So let's not act like Oklahoma returns everybody and just runs it back. They don't. But they did reload. I mean, you got Cole Sullivan from Michigan. Kenny Ozawalu from UTSA. Bishop Thomas, Georgia State. Imarian Harris from Arkansas. Like, the most important thing is the defensive identity is already established. And the line of scrimmage is pretty much established, but you've got pieces that I think can fit in there. I think that's the difference between Oklahoma now and a couple of years ago. They're not trying to figure out who they are defensively. They know. They're aggressive. They pressure you. They disguise things. They create confusion. The roster is built in the identity that Venables wants it to be. And they play fast. They're now built more like, a typical SEC championship defense. So when you look at strengths, number one is the defensive front and the overall defensive identity. They already play at a national championship level. Even with some veteran losses, the talent's still there. The structure's proven. Venables can heat you up from different places. And when you got players like Stone and Jackson and Lewis and whatnot, you can win a lot of ugly games. Number two is Mateer and Arbuckle staying together. That's huge. Quarterback, play caller continuity, that's massive in this league. No new language, no new let's figure each other out in September. Like, they know where they want to be. Mateer knows the system. Arbuckle knows what Mateer does well. It gives Oklahoma a much better chance to start fast offensively. And number three is the upgraded tight end and pass catcher room. Like, all the guys that I named before, it gives Oklahoma more options. And if the offensive line improves even a little bit in the run game, this becomes one of the more balanced teams in the SEC, as long as you keep Mateer healthy. And that's why Oklahoma could win big this year. Like, they've got a massive ceiling. Even with, 3 of the first 5 games are huge. Huge. But they've got elite defense, quarterback continuity, upgraded weapons, same staff structure, and a roster that's physical enough to live in the SEC week after week. Just like everybody else, there are red flags. First one is run game consistency and offensive line, physicality, I guess would be the best way. I think that's the whole deal. If they can't run the ball at a top 50 level, the ceiling just drops out. Because every big game turns into Mateer creating some kind of magic. He'll have to extend drives. He's got to bail out, bad down and distance. Like, you would be asking him to be Superman, and that's not sustainable. The second concern, I guess the second weakness, is replacing veteran production along that defensive front. Like I told you, I like the talent. I like the identity. I trust it. But when you lose Halton and R. Mason Thomas and Marvin Jones Jr., that's legit experienced production that's gone. You got young, high upside players that, have got to grow up fast here. And not even necessarily grow up fast because you got some experienced guys that are coming in from other places. It's just they have to fit in well. The third weakness that I've got is offensive volatility under Venables. It wasn't just last year. It's like a historical thing with him. Like, Oklahoma fans know this way too well. The defense has arrived. The toughness is there. But the offense has not always been steady enough to match that defensive standard. And if it happens again, Oklahoma is good, maybe really good, but they're not great. And I think that's the derailment scenario, like where the offense becomes one-dimensional, the running game is still inconsistent, Mateer has to carry the whole thing. Maybe he gets banged up again. The defense is still excellent, but the offense keeps the team, stuck in that good, not great tier. Like, this schedule is brutal again. It is easier than last year's slate, but, let's be honest. Like, easier than ridiculous can still be brutal. I think that's fair. Let's sort through some of these key games right quick. Week 2 at Michigan is a monster early test. That's one of those games where you find out immediately if your offensive line is ready to be physical because you're going up against a Kyle Whittingham team. If your quarterback's in rhythm and your defensive front can travel, that's a good test. I'm not gonna say that Week 4 against Georgia on the road is a key game. But Week 6 after the bye week against Texas, that's always enormous. This year, it sits right in a stretch where Oklahoma's got to prove it, like more than just a playoff team from last year. That game is a huge measuring stick for the entire Venables era, especially when you got blasted last year. Then I don't have another key game until Week 10 at Florida, because I would think, you're going to be favorites against Kentucky at home, at Mississippi State, and then at home against South Carolina. All of those are losable, but all of those are winnable as well. More than winnable. You're expected to win those. But Week 10 at Florida, that's dangerous. Road SEC game. Florida, you're not sure exactly what to expect in the first year under Jon Sumrall. And that is a week before you get Ole Miss at home. And you kind of owe them one. So it's late enough in the season that depth matters. That Florida game is the kind of game where a team with playoff expectations can't get caught slipping, right? And then my last key game, I've got home against Texas A&M in Week 12. That finishing stretch is no joke, man. At Florida, Ole Miss, A&M, at Missouri. The Week 5 bye is not exactly kind. That means 8 straight games with no break to close the season. And that stretch at the end, that's where depth and health and offensive balance and all that, it's going to decide the season. Potentially season-defining is that other stretch with Georgia, a bye week, Texas, and then Kentucky at home. It makes sense, but the whole back half is just a stress test here. This schedule it's either going to validate Oklahoma as a national contender or it's going to expose the same offensive issues that held them back last season. If they survive Georgia and Texas with only one loss, you're probably talking about a playoff host-level team if they can survive the last 8-game stretch. The ceiling, I think, for this team is 10-2. And that's the version where the run game becomes, we'll put a number on it, of top 50 nationally, where Mateer stays healthy, the upgraded pass catchers hit quickly, the defense reloads without losing its edge. If that happens, Oklahoma's an SEC contender and a legitimate CFP hosting candidate. The floor for this team, though, they're only favored in 6 games that I've got them. It's the version where the offense stays inconsistent. Mateer gets hurt again or has to carry too much. The run game doesn't do enough. Defensive front isn't quite ready for that schedule, especially early. Like in the SEC, that can turn into 4 losses really fast and then 5 and then 6 if things snowball. I think the most likely record for this team is 8-4. I think that's where I'm landing. The win total is at 7-5. The over is -112. The under is -110. It's basically a coin flip either way. My lean is over just based on what I saw last year, my belief in the defense, the coaching continuity, and experience at quarterback, especially with some of those early games. I know some Oklahoma fans are going to hear 8-4 and think that sounds disappointing after you made the playoff last year. And I get that, but this schedule is nasty. Like, the close wins from last year can absolutely flip, and we gotta see what's going on with Tate Sandell, right? The kicker, because he was automatic until the playoff game last year. What does that do for confidence? Can they get him feeling like himself against UTEP in week 1 before they go to Michigan, right? Like, offense still has to prove it can be balanced. Like, I like this team. I like the defense. I like the continuity. Like, Mateer and Arbuckle, I like them. But being really good still might only get you to 8-4 if the schedule is mean enough, which, I mean, this one is. It is gross. Absolutely gross. Final thought on the Sooners. This is a defense-first Oklahoma team that finally looks physically built for the SEC. And now the offense has got to prove it can carry championship expectations instead of just surviving them, right? I think that's the biggest thing with this. All right, one more reminder. If you haven't already, like the video, subscribe to Winning Cures Everything, and, of course, make sure and give me your thoughts in the comments. We're going to see you again next time. Till then, take care of yourself, take care of each other. God bless college football, and hopefully all of your tickets cash this week.
Thanks for listening to Winning Cures Everything. Subscribe, leave a review or comment, follow @GaryWCE on X, and check out the web store,